The movers thought I was dead. They knocked 3 times before the building manager let them in. I was in the kitchen, crouched by the cabinet under the sink, tightening the last screw on a loose hinge, not because it mattered, but because I needed one final thing I could fix before walking out of a home that broke itself. The bedroom was already empty. Just the imprint on her side of the mattress, perfectly oval, like she'd never once turned toward me in her sleep. I didn't leave a note. I didn't know one. What I left was the clock on the nightstand, the one she gave me 5 Christmases ago with our initials engraved on the back. She'd stopped winding it months ago, said the ticking gave her anxiety. She didn't know silence was worse. The apartment had become a museum of pretense. The couch was still fluffed like someone cared. The plants were still watered, though one was already dead at the roots. The picture frame in the hallway still held a smiling version of us from the Oregon trip, a version I didn't trust anymore. She'd been sleeping on her side of the bed for 43 nights. I counted. No fights. No yelling. Just space. Endless, polite space. Like living next to a stranger who once memorized your heartbeat but now walks past you like a shadow. People think betrayal shows up with lipstick or suspicious texts. Mine showed up in the form of quiet exits, eyes that stopped pausing on mine, and an untouched coffee mug I kept setting out every morning just in case she remembered who we were. She didn't. She remembered other things, though. She remembered to change her passwords. She remembered to shower before coming home. She remembered to laugh too hard at her phone while facing away from me on the couch. I once whispered something to her in the dark just to see if she'd react. She didn't even flinch. So I started making lists. Not of her mistakes, of mine. Things I said too quietly. Things I never corrected. Things I let slide because I was afraid if I spoke up, she'd vanish sooner. Turns out she was already gone. That night, the one that flipped everything started with dinner. She walked in late, blamed traffic, then poured herself a glass of wine and asked if I could sleep on the couch just for tonight. No explanation. No warmth. Just a sentence delivered like an invoice. I nodded. She went to bed. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I sat on that couch, stared at the spot where her head usually rested, and realized something that should have broken me but didn't. She wasn't having an affair. She was preparing my replacement. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled out the suitcase I'd been ignoring for weeks. It still had the tag from our last trip on it. 2 hours later, I was gone. And she didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't ask. The movers arrived the next morning. They didn't ask questions. But I knew what they were thinking. Because that's exactly what I used to think every morning. Where did he go? I didn't slam the door. That would have been too kind. Slammed doors get noticed. They get chased after. Instead, I closed it slow, so slow it barely clicked into place. Like I was afraid the silence might shatter. The hallway outside our apartment felt unfamiliar, like I'd stepped into a copy of my life printed one shade too pale. I didn't even realize I was still holding my toothbrush until I got to the elevator. No bag, no plan, just my toothbrush and the coat I always meant to dry clean but never did. I looked ridiculous. But I felt free. Not the kind of freedom they show in movies with sunshine and a new haircut. This kind felt heavier, like you just dropped a weight but forgot you were standing on a ledge. I checked into a motel 30 minutes later. Not because it was far, but because it was nowhere. That was what I wanted. A place where no one asked questions. The guy at the front desk barely looked up. He slid me the key and said, "Room 19. No smoking. TV doesn't work." I nodded like any of that mattered. I didn't turn on the lights when I got inside. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. She hadn't texted. Not even a "where are you" or "everything okay." And that's when I understood something that should have shattered me. It wasn't that she didn't care I left. It was that she'd already counted on it. Like I'd finally crossed the line she'd been quietly drawing behind her back, and now she could breathe again. I opened my phone, stared at her contact. Still labeled Dana Rehart, like I hadn't noticed her heart had been offline for weeks. My thumb hovered over it. I didn't call. Instead, I opened the gallery. I swiped through photo after photo, road trips, holidays, her birthday dinners, the surprise weekend in Asheville, her crying when we watched that dumb movie with the deaf dog. She looked happiest in pictures I hadn't taken. That should have told me everything. I fell asleep in my jeans, curled toward the wall, phone still glowing on the pillow beside me. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I woke up, heart racing, throat dry, and for a second, I forgot where I was. I reached for the other side of the bed. It was empty, of course. But it was more than empty, it was honest. For the first time in months, no one was pretending beside me. The next morning, I got up early and drove past the apartment. Not to go in. Just to see. Her car was there. Curtains still drawn. Nothing looked different, but everything had changed. I parked across the street and waited. 10 minutes later, she came out. Hair done. Red coat. A different purse. And something in her posture I hadn't seen in months. Lightness. She walked down the steps like someone heading into a day that didn't include me. But she wasn't alone. He came out 6 seconds after her. Tall, clean-cut, sleeves rolled, holding a travel mug like he owned the place. She didn't glance back at the building. Didn't hesitate. She touched his arm, said something that made him laugh, and they got into my car. That's when I realized. She hadn't been replacing me emotionally. She'd been replacing me completely. I didn't follow them. I just sat there with my hands clenched around the steering wheel of my rental, feeling the raw pressure in my chest like something important had just snapped loose and started drifting. It wasn't just that they left together. It was that she smiled. Not the forced, polite version she used to give me at dinner when she was trying to look interested in what I was saying. This was real. Teeth, eyes, shoulders. Everything about her body language screamed ease, joy, relief, like she'd finally taken off shoes that had been too tight for years. I watched them pull away, the rear tires of my old car turning smooth over pavement I paid to reseal last spring. That car was the last thing we technically still shared. Now it was another thing quietly absorbed into her new life, along with the spare keys, the dog we never adopted, and the pieces of me she'd already thrown away in her mind. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in the car until my coffee went cold and the sun angled harshly through the windshield. When I finally drove off, it wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. I took side roads, back streets, anything to avoid retracing the routes we used to drive together. Our life was all over this town. Restaurants, intersections, even that damn mailbox with the dent she backed into the second day we moved in. You don't realize how many places hold ghosts until you're trying to outrun one. I checked into a new motel, this one farther out, near a highway I didn't know well. The room was beige and lifeless, but at least it didn't smell like her shampoo or have drawers full of her hair ties. I lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, asking myself the same question I'd been circling around for weeks but never dared to say out loud. Did I let this happen? Because deep down, I knew things weren't right long before the bed grew cold. I saw the signs, the way she stopped correcting my grammar, stopped asking about my day, stopped commenting on the things I cooked. I mistook quiet for peace. I thought if we weren't fighting, we were fine. But what I didn't realize is that sometimes silence isn't a ceasefire. It's a surrender. And I had surrendered without even knowing. I ordered dinner but didn't eat it. I left the tray untouched on the little desk and instead grabbed the motel's notepad. I started writing everything I could remember about the last year of our marriage. Not the memories, but the gaps. The missed calls. The sorry, I'm busy messages. The new perfume she started wearing that she said was a gift from a friend, even though she always hated floral scents. The gym bag that started living in her trunk. The weekly girls' nights that I never got invited to. And worst of all, the feeling that I had started talking to someone who had already decided I wasn't worth responding to. The scariest part wasn't that she replaced me. It was how easy I made it for her. Around midnight, I got a text. My heart jumped, hoping stupidly that it was her, that maybe she'd noticed I was gone. But it wasn't. Unknown number. One sentence. I thought you deserved to know. Attached was a photo. It was her, Dana, sitting in the passenger seat of my car, smiling wide, head resting on that man's shoulder. They were parked somewhere unfamiliar, drinks in the cup holders, and she looked younger, happier, lighter, like she'd shed the weight of me and gained something better in return. I stared at the image until my phone dimmed. Then I sat perfectly still, as if moving might make it worse. But what haunted me wasn't the fact that someone sent me proof. It was that they felt the need to, which meant someone, out there, saw what she was doing and thought I didn't know. They were wrong. I knew. I had always known. But there's a difference between suspecting someone is gone and seeing the seat they used to fill now warmed by someone else. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. That photo haunted me not because she looked happy but because I didn't recognize the person next to her, and I don't mean the man. I mean her. That version of Dana was foreign to me. The way she leaned into him, the way her eyes softened like she'd let her guard down for the first time in years. She never looked like that around me anymore. And maybe she never had. Maybe I only imagined she did because I wanted so badly to believe we still had something that felt like home. I turned the phone over on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The air in the room felt thinner, like I was trying to breathe through regret. And the thing is, I hadn't even confronted her. Not once. Not a text. Not a call. Not a single message to ask why. I wasn't sure if that made me a coward or just finally exhausted. The next morning, I drove back into town. Not to see her, I couldn't have handled that. I just needed to get my stuff from the storage unit. It was where I kept the remnants of my life before Dana. Old records. College notebooks. The blanket my mother knitted before she passed. All the things I gave up space for when we moved in together. It was like a museum of the man I used to be before I started shrinking myself to fit inside a relationship that no longer had room for me. I opened the roll-up door and just stood there for a minute, staring at the boxes. I hadn't visited in years. The dust made it feel like time had sealed everything shut. I sat down on one of the crates and let myself feel something for the first time since I left. Not anger, not betrayal, just grief. Grief for all the quiet moments I kept hoping would fix themselves. Grief for the man who thought waiting patiently could save a connection that was already gone. And then my phone rang. It wasn't her. It was him. Blocked number. Male voice. Calm. Too calm. He said my name like we were old friends, and I felt my spine stiffen. Hey man, he began, like he wasn't sleeping next to the woman I'd built a life with. You don't know me, but I just wanted to say I didn't plan for any of this. It just happened. I sat frozen. I didn't hang up. I couldn't. I wanted to hear what a man like that tells himself. What lies he wraps around someone else's wife to sleep well at night. He kept talking. I didn't know she was married at first. I swear. She told me later. By then we were already in it too deep. His voice cracked, just a little. She said you two were basically roommates. She said you hadn't touched her in months. That you were cold. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was too perfect. The narrative. The justification. I'd been cast as the emotionally unavailable husband in someone else's affair. I was the excuse she used to forgive herself. I asked one question. Just one. Did she tell you about the way she used to cry when she thought I didn't notice her new haircut? He was silent. Or how I saved every note she ever wrote me in the drawer she stopped opening? Nothing. Did she tell you I used to sit up at night Googling how to make her happy again? Silence. And then he hung up. That silence was louder than anything he could have said. Because it wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about who she became when she stopped needing me to hold up her mirror. About who she wanted to be when she didn't have to look back and see the man who remembered too much of her old self. I stared at the phone for a while, then slid it into the box with the records. I closed the lid. I was done carrying proof. Later that evening, I checked my email for the first time in days. There was one from Dana. The subject line, house stuff. No, hey. No, where are you? No apology. Just 3 lines, can you send me the garage code? And let me know if you want the blender back. Otherwise, I'll donate it. That was it. After 10 years. I reread it 6 times, not because I didn't understand, but because I couldn't believe I did. She didn't want closure. She wanted clearance. So I sent her the code. And I told her she could keep the blender. 3 days passed before I went back. I told myself it was just to grab my birth certificate and a few documents I'd forgotten, but that was a lie. The truth? I wanted to see if the air still remembered me. If the walls still echoed my footsteps. If maybe, just maybe, a part of her would flinch when I walked in. I had my own keys, but I knocked anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I was giving her a chance to brace herself. Or maybe I was giving myself a second to run. She didn't answer. The door creaked open after a few seconds, not by her hand, but his. He answered my door. Wearing a hoodie I recognized. Mine. Something I must have left draped over the living room chair, and now it hung off his shoulders like it belonged there. He looked surprised, but not apologetic. His eyes met mine without hesitation, like this had already played out in his head. Like he prepared for it and decided he wouldn't cower. And the worst part? I didn't feel rage. I felt humiliation. I felt like the ex-boyfriend of a woman who used to be my wife, standing at the door of a house I still legally owned, asking permission to step into a life that used to be mine. I didn't say a word to him. I stepped past, walked straight to the hallway, and paused at the entrance to the kitchen. She was there. Dana. Cutting vegetables. Calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from closure. Her hair was up. She was barefoot. She wore the apron I got her for our second anniversary, the one with the little stitched heart she once said was too cheesy to wear. And now here she was, wearing it like a second skin, like it had been waiting for this version of her to come alive. She looked up, saw me, and didn't even flinch. She said, "Hey," like I was a neighbor dropping off borrowed Tupperware. I stood there, trying to find words. But everything felt ridiculous. I couldn't ask how she was. I knew. I couldn't ask why. I already understood. I couldn't ask who he was. She'd already made that part clear. So instead I asked, "Can I get the folder from the office?" She nodded like we were two coworkers navigating a shared workspace after a merger. "It's where you left it," she said. And that was that. No hesitation. No stutter. She didn't even stop slicing the red pepper. I went to the office, grabbed the folder, then paused by the bookshelf. There was a new photo in the frame. Her and him. Same spot we used to use for Christmas pictures. His arm around her waist. Her chin tilted slightly, the exact way she used to lean into me. That frame used to hold a picture of us at the lake. She didn't just replace me, she rewrote me. Like I'd never been in that story at all. I should have walked out. I should have left with dignity. But something pulled me back. I turned, walked back to the kitchen, and asked, stupidly, pathetically, "Do you want me to take the dog bed?" I noticed it's still there. She blinked. Then, and I'll never forget this, she smiled. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Just politely. Like someone answering a stranger's question in a checkout line. "No, we got rid of it. We're getting a new dog. We're getting a new dog." The words hit harder than the affair. Harder than the photo. It wasn't just that she moved on, it was that she was building a better life using the blueprint we once drew together. Only now I was erased from the walls, the plans, the foundation. She wasn't mourning the past. She was renovating it. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't slam the door or throw anything or give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I walked out calm, but inside something had ruptured. I got back into the car and sat for 15 minutes with the keys in the ignition. The folder lay on the passenger seat, but I couldn't even look at it. The truth was, I hadn't gone back for papers. I went back because some part of me still believed she might say, "Wait, please don't go." But she didn't. She closed the door behind me without a sound. And I realized, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid I'd gotten used to not being seen. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I drove for hours, circling towns I hadn't seen since college, letting the lines on the highway dissolve into one long blur. The sun went down somewhere outside of Lansing, and I didn't notice until I had to squint to see the road signs. I wasn't running away. Not exactly. I was just allergic to familiarity, to the smell of that room, to the taste of silence, to the echo of her voice in my head saying, "We're getting a new dog." It wasn't the betrayal that stung anymore. It was the ease. The way she had removed me from her life like peeling off a label. No residue. No hesitation. Around 11:30 p.m. I found a small diner still open near a closed gas station. It had that flickering neon sign, the kind that buzzes like a dying fly. I parked in the back, took the farthest booth, and didn't order anything but coffee. The waitress didn't ask questions. She had that look, the kind people get when they've stopped trying to solve their own messes, let alone anyone else's. I appreciated that. The coffee tasted like regret, burnt, thin, and trying too hard to feel warm. I sat there for over an hour, staring at the chipped Formica table when a familiar sound broke my trance. A ringtone. My ringtone. Dana's phone. For a second I thought it was my imagination. But it wasn't. Someone at the next booth had the same tone, the same one I'd set for her years ago, a soft piano trill from a movie she loved. It had followed me around for years, even after she stopped answering when I called. And now here it was, blaring from a stranger's phone. I froze. My chest locked up. The man who answered it didn't even look at me, but his voice was loud enough to hear. "Yeah, babe, I'll be back soon. Just grabbing smokes." And just like that, my hands began to shake. It wasn't her. I knew that. But something about hearing that sound come from someone else's life, someone else's phone, cracked something in me. I left cash on the table and walked out into the parking lot, breathing like I just surfaced from underwater. There was no plan. No destination. I just drove until I reached a rest stop with broken vending machines and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. I slept in the car, curled into the driver's seat with my jacket over my face, hoping dreams might offer more comfort than reality. They didn't. In the morning, I checked my email again. Another message from Dana. This one had no subject. Just a single line. "You forgot your old journals. Should I toss them?" No question mark. No pause. No recognition of what they were or what they meant. My journals. Years of entries she once called beautiful when we first met. The same notebooks I used to read aloud from when we lay on the couch with candles burning, back when we thought permanence was something you could create just by saying it out loud. I didn't respond right away. I opened my cloud backup instead. I hadn't looked at it in ages. Thousands of photos, notes, recordings, receipts. And buried in a forgotten folder labeled drafts, I found something I wrote over a year ago. The file name was If She Ever Leaves. I had no memory of writing it, but the words were mine. Raw. Blunt. Almost prophetic. I had written, she will leave quietly. Not through the door, but through her gaze. She'll stay in the house, sleep in your bed, but every night, more of her will disappear. Until you're sleeping beside an outline. And one day you'll wake up and realize she's already gone. I read it 5 times. Then I went back to the email, typed 2 words, and hit send. Keep them. Because they weren't mine anymore. Not really. They belonged to the version of me that believed love was a matter of waiting long enough. And I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't strong yet. I wasn't healed. But I was finally done waiting for someone who had already left me long before she moved to his side of the bed. I told myself I wouldn't contact her again. Not after the journals. Not after hearing his voice in my house. I meant it too. I really believed the silence was strength. But grief is a trickster. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder politely. It grabs you by the throat in the middle of a grocery store because you saw her favorite cereal. Or because someone walked past wearing her perfume. Or, in my case, because I accidentally butt dialed her. I was trying to open my banking app. Instead, I must have hit her name. I didn't notice until I heard her voice. Ellis? Just that. Just my name. And it hit like a car crash. The same name she'd stopped using in full months ago. She used to shorten it L or just hey. But now it was Ellis again. Formal. Distant. Real. I panicked and ended the call without a word. She didn't call back. 10 minutes later, I got a text. Was that a mistake? I stared at it for 15 minutes before replying. Yes. But that was a lie. The real mistake was staying quiet for so long that now even my accidental calls carried more emotion than our actual conversations ever did. I tossed the phone on the passenger seat and kept driving. No music. No podcasts. Just the hum of the road and the mental noise I couldn't turn off. By evening, I found myself in front of a house I hadn't been to in almost a decade, my brother Joel's place. We hadn't talked much since the wedding. Not because of any drama, just life. He had kids. I had a marriage. The distance grew quietly like everything else in my life. But when he opened the door and saw me standing there with a bag that still smelled like motel soap, he didn't ask questions. He just stepped aside and said, "You want to eat first or talk first?" I didn't cry. Not then. I waited until his wife went upstairs and the kids were asleep. We sat in his garage with 2 beers and a space heater buzzing at our feet, and for the first time in months, I said it out loud. She replaced me like I was a couch that didn't match her new aesthetic. Joel didn't say anything. He just handed me another beer and let me keep talking. I told him everything, the man, the photo, the phone call, the emails. I told him about the journals, the missing dog bed, the apron, the frame. Every little humiliation I thought I had buried under logic and restraint came pouring out like I was vomiting years of emotional constipation. When I finally stopped, Joel leaned back, scratched the side of his neck and said, "You know what no one tells you about being left? It's not the leaving that hurts. It's that you start asking whether you were ever really in." That hit harder than anything Dana had said or hadn't said. Because it was true. I kept asking myself when I lost her. But maybe the real tragedy was that I never truly had her. Maybe I fell in love with an idea that she outgrew long before I noticed. That night, I slept in Joel's guest room, a space filled with old laundry, a broken fan, and Spider-Man stickers on the walls. And yet I slept better there than I had in months. Because no one in that house expected me to pretend I was fine. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Dana. "You didn't mean to call me, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I don't hate you. I just couldn't keep waiting for something I didn't believe in anymore." I stared at the message, half expecting it to cut deeper. But it didn't. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. She left me emotionally long before she ever packed me out of her heart. And maybe, in some twisted way, she thought I'd already left her too. Not with bags. Not with infidelity. But with quietness. With retreat. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because nothing I said would make her see me the way I needed to be seen. I put the phone down, opened my bag, and pulled out a notebook I bought on the drive. Blank pages. No agenda. No chapters from the past. And I wrote the title at the top of page 1. Now that I am gone too. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't drive past the house again. I didn't reread her message or mine or the old photos. I stayed at Joel's place for 3 more nights, helping him fix the fence, wrangle his kids, and unclog the disaster under his kitchen sink. None of it was profound. None of it was poetic. But somehow watching life move without needing to impress anyone started to feel like healing. On the 4th morning, I woke up and didn't check my phone. Not even once. No anxious glances at my inbox. No hopeful scrolls through the notifications. The silence didn't scare me. It felt deserved. Mine. Owned. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting on someone else's words to tell me who I was. I made coffee before anyone else was up. Sat on the back porch in Joel's ridiculous pink flamingo robe, sipping from a chipped mug that said #OneDad, even though I wasn't one. It didn't matter. The sun came up slow and full, like it wasn't in a hurry to convince me of anything. And I realized I hadn't smiled in weeks, but now I was. Not because something amazing had happened, but because nothing had. No drama. No betrayal. No edge-of-your-seat confrontation. Just breath. Just stillness. Just me. By noon, I had packed my things and left a note for Joel. Nothing long. Just, thanks for reminding me what a normal day looks like. Then I drove back into town, not to the house. To a co-working space I had passed 1,000 times but never entered. I booked a desk for a month. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't fancy. But it had light, people typing in silence, and the kind of energy that says, you're not done yet. I sat down at a borrowed desk and opened my new journal. The one I'd started at the motel. I flipped to the page I titled, Now That I Am Gone Too, and below it, I began writing something new. But this time it wasn't about her. Not about what she did. Or didn't do. It wasn't even about the man in my hoodie or the house that no longer remembered me. It was about who I could still become now that I had stopped building my life around someone else's absence. The entries weren't poetic. Not at first. But they were honest. Day by day, I made rules for myself. Rule 1. Don't assume silence means rejection. Sometimes it just means space. Rule 2. Your value isn't measured by who chooses to stay, it's measured by what you do after they leave. Rule 3. Heal out loud if you need to. There's no dignity in quiet drowning. Weeks passed. I rented a small apartment over a bookstore. I joined a writing group. I even signed up for cooking lessons, not to impress anyone, but because I was tired of microwaving guilt for dinner. Dana reached out again once. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed her voice to confirm that mine still mattered. And one morning I opened my email and found something unexpected, an invitation. A small literary magazine had accepted one of my essays, something I wrote in that co-working space on a rainy Tuesday when I almost went home early. They said it was raw, quiet, brave. I read their email 5 times. And this time it did hit deep, but not because it validated me. Because it reminded me that I was still here. Still writing. Still becoming. Still worth the pages.